Good afternoon, Year 8. Welcome to this week's recorded lesson. This week, we're going to be moving on from World War I. We've now finished that part of the course, and we're going to move on now to look at the Second World War, and initially today, looking at the causes of the Second World War. And this is going to be a two-part lesson, so we're going to split it over today, and there may be a live lesson next week. Learning outcomes, we're going to know how to look at the main events leading up to the outbreak of the Second World War, and to make a judgment between us and decide which factors we think are more important and which ones were more essential to the war breaking out. Right, first things first, I would just like us to test our knowledge of World War II and what we think we know so far, okay? So what I'd like to do is put a little title of World War II and then go down a little bit and give yourself a bit of space. Do a mind map, put World War II in the middle, okay? Then around it, I would like to put any key words, phrases, or anything you think you may know about the Second World War around it, just to give yourself a test about what your knowledge is like to do with the Second World War. So around your mind map, any keywords, phrases, any facts you know about the Second World War, anything you think you know, get it down on this mind map. If you'd like to pop the video on pause just for a second so you can do that and fill in as many keywords as you can, go ahead and do that. Right, first one I put, Churchill. Obviously, we all know Winston Churchill. He was the war leader and Prime Minister of the UK during the Second World War, or for the most part of it as well. Everybody knows Churchill. He was a big key figure of the Second World War. I also put Hitler. Obviously, I think we all know Hitler as well as the dictator of Germany at the time, and historically, the way we look at it, the bad guy of the war. D-Day. D-Day is another really important key phrase. It highlights a really key battle of the Second World War. Obviously, the D-Day landings took place in 1944 and marked the Allied invasion of Europe and the fight back of the Allies against the Nazis. Dunkirk. Dunkirk is a very famous event during the Second World War. It was where the British evacuated many of their troops from France in order to save them and save them for another day. Britain was on the verge of a catastrophe where it would lose a lot of its troops, either taken prisoner or killed. But many people took their boats out to France and saved British people and brought them back home. So a really important moment in the Second World War. Nazis, obviously, we know about Nazis. We know how evil they were. They're a very right-wing political party that took over Germany just before the Second World War, and with a key reason, or one of the key reasons, why the war broke out. I also put Stalingrad. This is another really important battle. I think many of you may not have heard of this one. Stalingrad was a battle on the Eastern Front and took place in Russia between the Germans and the Russians. We'll have a look at that over the next couple of weeks and you'll understand that a bit more, but another really important battle. Battle of Britain, obviously another really important battle. This one a little bit closer to home. This was a battle that took place in the air between the Luftwaffe of Germany and the Royal Air Force. It was when Germany made their attempt to invade Britain and Britain held out. And finally, I put the Holocaust. Some of you may know about the Holocaust and what it's all about. We're going to go into a lot of detail in the Holocaust over the next few weeks and month or so. And we're going to do a whole section on it, looking at what the Nazis did to Jewish people, what was the thought behind it, and what went on during it. Right, moving on. This here is going to be the main focus of our lesson today and the main focus of our lesson next week, okay? So we're going to go through all of the individual causes of the Second World War, okay? So we're going to read about them. We're going to have little discussions in a live lesson maybe next week and analyse the 4 stages which led to the outbreak of the war. The first one is the Treaty of Versailles, which we'll go into detail today. The second, the growth of dictators. So a dictator is somebody who rules and takes power on their own and there's no democracy. Hitler's foreign policy and appeasement. Okay, so they're the 4 things we're going to be looking at as the major factors in the outbreak of the war. Don't worry if you're struggling a little bit with some of those words there. As we go through the lessons over this week and next week, it'll become really clear and they'll be much easier for you to understand. So don't worry if you don't understand any of them at the moment. Over the course of today and the lesson next week, we'll go through those and we'll understand fully why the Second World War kicked off in the way that it did. Right, the first stage is having a look at what happened at the end of World War I. So this is a really good place for us to pick up and start with World War II, as World War I is very fresh in our minds and we've just seen how that concluded. So at the end of World War I, Germany and the allies of Germany had been defeated. Okay, we all know that. We've covered that over the last couple of weeks. The German emperor at the time, Kaiser Wilhelm, had abdicated the throne, which meant he had given up the throne and his position had disappeared, and a new democracy called the Weimar Republic was set up. So a democracy is where everybody votes for who they want to lead the country. Okay? At a peace conference at the end of the war, the nations who won, so America, Britain, France, began the process of creating a peace treaty that everybody had to sign. Germany was forced to sign that treaty, and this treaty was called the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, now this is a really, really important treaty, and it's seen as quite controversial. There were many arguments about it at the time. Many thought it was very, very harsh on Germany, and it might have been very unfair. Okay, for your first task, I would like to read through the terms of the Treaty of Versailles and try and match them with the consequence on the right. Okay, so down below you'll see the terms of the treaty on the left. I'll read those out. War guilt, Germany accepted all blame for starting World War I. Military strength, the army was cut to 100,000 men. Overseas empire, all of Germany's colonies were taken away. League of Nations, Germany was not allowed to join. Land, parts of Germany were given away to border countries such as France. And reparations. Reparation is something that Germany had to pay, and they had to pay £600 million, to the Allies, which is loads and loads of money. Okay, so there's 6 of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles which Germany had to sign. The first thing I would like you to do is match those up. Okay, so write the terms down, write the consequences down next to them, and draw an arrow from the term to the consequence of it. Okay, the first one I will do for you. War guilt. So war guilt, you draw your line across, and that goes to Germans hated being blamed and felt it was only because they had lost. Okay, so Germany had to accept all the blame, but they thought they were being blamed for the whole war, even though it wasn't entirely their fault, and it was only because they had lost that they had to do this. Okay, so that was a consequence. So I'd like you to pop the video on pause just for the moment and finish off the rest of the terms and match them up to some of the consequences. Okay. Right, I hope now you've all had a chance to do that, and we'll run through the answers. Okay, so the first one we've already done together as war guilt. Germany accepted all the blame for starting World War I. The arrow goes across to Germans hated being blamed, and it felt like it was only because they had lost. Okay, that's the first one we did together. Secondly, military strength. That one goes down to near the bottom. Soldiers resented this. They lost pride in the military. Okay, so because their military was shrunk down to only 100,000 men, soldiers really hated that, and they lost pride in the military. Okay, so whereas they would have felt proud to be in the army beforehand, now they resented it and felt really upset about this. Overseas empire is the second one from the top. Germany could no longer rely on trade with its empire. Okay, so Germany owned colonies in Africa, which meant that they owned countries in Africa, and they traded with these countries, so that was really good for making them money. As a result of this treaty, they actually had to give up those colonies and not work with those countries anymore. So that was going to lose them a lot of money and cost them a lot of cash and make it very difficult for them in the next few years after the war had finished. League of Nations there links up with the one on the bottom. The League of Nations was set up as an organisation between governments to maintain world peace. So Britain was in it, America was in it, and they were an international organisation to prevent there being another war and to keep world peace. As a result of the treaty, Germany was not allowed in this organisation. Okay, so they felt really left out. They felt really left out of the politics of peace and sort of rebuilding the world after the First World War and the horrors that went along with it. So this was a really big blow and would have hurt people in Germany quite a lot. Then we've got land. Parts of Germany were given away to border countries such as France. This goes with many Germans found themselves living in another country. Okay, so many parts of Germany and on the border with France were actually taken from Germany and given to other countries such as France. So there were many Germans living in this area who were then told that they weren't in Germany anymore and they were actually in France. Okay, so there were many German people who were living in countries which were alien to them and they didn't realise. So this would have made them feel really upset. They would have lost their national identity and they would have found it really difficult to come to terms with. So you can start to see and see here in even more detail how painful this treaty has been to normal German people and how it would have hurt them. Finally, reparations. Reparations links with the consequence on the top there on the side. Germany had to pay 6,600 million pounds to the Allies, and the consequence of this is Germany simply couldn't keep up with the payments. It was so much money for Germany to pay. They had to pay for all the damage caused by the First World War, so all the explosions that happened in towns. They had to clean all that up. They had to pay for everything to be fixed, and this was really, really damaging for their economy. And if it's damaging for the economy, people are not going to be living as well, people are not going to have jobs, and people are going to be living through really, really hard times. So you can see how this treaty has really damaged Germany, really damaged German people, and might make them feel quite resentful and quite angry against other countries in Europe, which maybe could lead to a war and could cause fighting to come back again, because Germany feel really upset and angry. Before we move on, I'd just like you to write a quick sentence, maybe 2 or 3 lines. I would like you to write how this would have caused the Second World War. How would the Treaty of Versailles cause another war to break out? So focus on how it would have made Germany feel, what it would have done to German economy, and so on, okay? So pop the video on pause, write a little paragraph. How would the Treaty of Versailles cause the Second World War? Right, moving on. Now we're going to play a little game just to test our knowledge again and see where we're at with World War II and how much we know. If you'd like to put the little title, Name the Dictator, we're going to have a look at 3 from the Second World War and see if we know who they are and see if we know anything about them, okay? But before we do that, I'd like us to see if we know what a dictator actually is, okay? The definition that I've put is a dictator is a person who has absolute power in a country, okay? I'd like all of us to write that down in our books or on our paper. A dictator is a person who has absolute power in a country, okay? So a dictator is somebody not like our Prime Minister today, who has to report to Parliament and gets voted in by the people. A dictator is a person who is in complete control. There's no elections to vote them in or out. They're just in power for however long suits them, and they make all the decisions by themselves, okay? So they have nobody to answer to and nobody telling them what they have to do. They have absolute control of the country, okay? So pop the video on pause just for 2 seconds, write down that definition. It's really, really important to understand that. Right, first dictator there is a picture. Anybody know who that is? If you know who it is, write it down. That's Adolf Hitler from Germany, so well done if you got that. Obviously, I think he's a pretty famous one and probably the most famous one on this list, so well done if you got that. Picture of the second one coming up now. Give you 2 seconds to think about who that might be and write it down. That is Benito Mussolini, okay, so he was a fascist dictator, so similar in many ways to Hitler in terms of their ideas. He was the leader of Italy, okay, so Italy was one of the friends of Germany during the Second World War and an enemy of Britain. So these 2 guys are fascists, they are dictators at the time and had absolute power in their countries of Germany and Italy, okay. Right, final one. There's the picture of the final one there. If you know it, write it down. If not, well, I'll give you the answer in a moment. That is Joseph Stalin, okay? He was the dictator of Russia, or the Soviet Union as it was known then. Really well done if you got that one. That's a very, very difficult one. Joseph Stalin was the communist leader of the Soviet Union. So he was a dictator who had absolute control. He was in charge for a very, very long time, as all these dictators were, as there's nobody who can actually vote them out, okay? These are 3 of the really main dictators of the war: Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. Really important names to remember, really important people to remember. These are the 3 big dictators, okay? So if you didn't know them before, make a note of them just so you can remember it. Right, guys, this is our last big task of today's lesson then. And we're going to look at these dictators, and specifically Hitler, in more detail, and how his power led to war, okay? Many people struggle to understand why people followed Hitler, why people might have liked Hitler, as we all now see him as a bad person, a really bad person. But many people back in Germany at the time actually did really like him, and there are many reasons for that. So we're going to have a little look at those now, okay? What I'd like you to do is just draw a table in your books with 2 factors, okay? So on one side, it's going to say anger at the Treaty of Versailles, and you're going to put a line in the middle, and write Nazi policies. Okay, so on one side, anger at the Treaty of Versailles, on the other, Nazi policies. Okay, so if we can all draw that table in our books, that would be great. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. If you want to quickly pause the video, go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on. Right, I hope you've all got that table sorted now. If you look to the right of the screen, you'll see 6 factors or 6 things that happened during Hitler's time in charge of Germany. And we're going to look whether these things are anger at the Treaty of Versailles or Nazi policies, okay? So the first one, the promise to remilitarize Germany would bring huge industrial contracts which were good for the economy. Okay, so he was going to remilitarize, so add more people into the army, make more weapons. Second one, the Nazis promised better pensions and more employment opportunities. So people will have safer pensions for when they retire and there'll be more jobs for people. The Nazis adopted policies that made them popular to every group of people. So they made policies in every area which made them popular to all kinds of different people and not just rich people or white people, for example. The fourth one, a promise to abolish the unfair punishment caused by the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so the Nazis and Hitler specifically were going to abolish the unfair punishment. Fifth one, soldiers loved that Hitler planned to make Germany a strong military power again. So we saw earlier before how soldiers felt quite down about losing the military, and that they loved how Hitler planned to make Germany strong again. And finally, the Treaty of Versailles humiliated German people who felt they were being unfairly punished. Okay, so this is one of the focuses of Hitler and one of the things he did. Okay, so is this about Treaty of Versailles or is this about Nazi policies? Okay, so all the ones you think are about Versailles, write on the anger of the Treaty of Versailles side. Those which are Nazi policies, write on the Nazi policies side. So if you could just pop the video on pause now and go ahead and fill in that table. All the factors about Versailles on one side, all the factors about Nazis on the other. So pause the video, complete the table, and then I'll go through the answers. Okay, first one, I hope you've all had the chance now to complete the table. The first one, Nazi policies. Okay, so it was a policy of the Nazis that made them popular to militarize Germany again and make them a strong military, build weaponry, build machinery, and give good jobs for the economy, which was really popular for German people because they felt pride in their military rather, and felt happy that it would be coming back again. Number 2, again, Nazi policies. So more employment opportunities means that there's better jobs for people. So that was quite attractive to a lot of German people at the time who were going through a tough time economically. So more jobs was really good for them. Third, the Nazis adopted policies that made them popular to every group. Is again policies, so focusing on all kinds of people at all levels of society, whether it's for workers, giving them new jobs, or to do with taxes for richer people. He made sure that he was very popular for a large group of people. Number 4 is about the treaty. So well done if you got that. He promised to abolish the unfair punishment caused by the treaty. So this was really attractive for many people because German people felt really upset about the treaty and felt like it treated them unfairly. So Hitler saying that he is going to abolish it was really attractive for people. Fifth, Nazi policies. Soldiers loved Hitler planned to make Germany a strong military power again. So it was a policy of them to appeal to soldiers and make them look really good by saying they were going to build the military up strong again. So that's another good Nazi policy that people liked. And finally, the Treaty of Versailles humiliated German people. So Nazis rather, talking about that and talking about how they're going to get rid of it is another way that the focus on the treaty by Hitler would have been attractive to people. Okay, well done if you got all of those. If you got any wrong, just correct them with a red pen or something and cross it out and put the right answer. Okay. Before we move on, I'd just like to write a quick sentence on this slide. Why would the rise of dictators cause a war? Okay, so why do we think these factors that we've seen in our tables might lead to a second war? Think about the treaty, think about these policies. Why might a war break out because of these things? Right, final thing before I let you go, Year 8. I know you've done a lot of writing today, so well done for that, but just a little bit more to go. Just as a little plenary to finish off, I'd like to write a short paragraph. Which reason was the most important for the breakout of World War II so far? So far we've looked at the Treaty of Versailles, We've looked at dictators, specifically Hitler. So out of those two factors, which do you think is the most important? Okay. So I'd like you to write a sentence saying which one you think is most important and give me a reason why you think that is. And then once you've done that, if you can upload all your work to today to show my homework, so me and Mr. Simpson can have a little look at it and go through it and see if it's all good. And then other than that, guys, I think that's about it for today. And that wraps up the recorded lesson. So write up your paragraph, then you finished off and upload your work to show my homework. And I'll see you all next week for a live lesson, hopefully, where we can go through things in a bit more detail and have more discussions. So thanks for turning up, guys. I'll see you next week.